Welcome to the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast. Today our topic is No Money Down Real Estate Investing Case Studies.
Welcome to the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast with Scott Whitwam, your blueprint to financial abundance. Settle in as we explore the mindset and methods for wealth building through real estate.
Welcome back. I'm Scott Whitwam, and I'm glad you joined me today for No Money Down Real Estate Investing Case Studies. This will be an interesting podcast as I go through a couple of closed, no money down real estate investment deals. How I found the deals, how I negotiated the terms, and how I closed them using these real estate investor keys found in my book, No Money Down, Your Path to Real Estate Investing with No or Low Down Payment. As a listener to this podcast, and for a limited time, you can get a free copy of my book by using the QR code available if you're watching by the video version of this podcast, or going to www.nomoneydowncoach.com. That is www.nomoneydowncoach.com. I want to deviate from the book a little today and not go over the case studies that are detailed in the book, No Money Down. You can get the book for free and read those case studies yourself. And the step-by-step way that we did those transactions are outlined there. Instead, I thought I would go through a couple of other deals as each acquisition has its own twists and turns. And what I hope is that I'm helping teach you as an investor the principles that lay the foundation for using this investing technique. Once you get the principles down, you'll be able to create the action plan for success on each deal. And I want to thank you for all of the feedback, the comments, and the requests for more information about how you actually do some of these deals. And that is the reason why I want to talk about some of these today. And the first deal I want to talk about is a house that we purchased in Apache Junction, Arizona. And we used a technique that I call condition credit. It's a technique that I learned on my own, and I'm going to go through the steps first, how I found the opportunity, the terms I negotiated, and then how I closed the deal. Now, one of the things that, if you've listened to me on this podcast and, many of our other, messages that we send out through the week, one of the things that I teach my coaching students is you have to develop a network. You have to develop a network of people who know that you're a real estate investor. So if you're an experienced real estate investor, you probably have already done that. You've got your fillers out. You're involved in networking groups. You're involved in investor groups. You're involved in all kinds of different ways that people know that you are in this market. And that is one of the ways that you can get referrals. So for the beginner, I would say, if you're going to be a real estate investor, you have to act like a real estate investor. You've got to let people know that you're investing in real estate. When you meet somebody and they ask you what to do, don't tell them that you work at the 7-Eleven. Say, I'm a real estate investor. I buy homes for cash. And start making your persona, your personhood, that people recognize you as an investor, so that when they hear of an opportunity, they get a hold of you. When somebody needs to sell a house fast, it's not in a condition to go on the MLS, maybe it's a hoarder home, whatever the deal is, a fire burnout, whatever, you get that phone call first. That's what you want. And that's how I found this opportunity. This opportunity actually came from another investor, somebody that I know is an investor. But again, not all investors invest with the same, methods and techniques and use the same system. This investor had bought, I can't remember whether it was 7 or 10 investment properties, and he paid all cash for them. And he kept them all as buy and hold. That was his method. He had saved up money. He had worked for a government agency and had saved money for his 30 years of service. And when he retired, he had a large sum of cash that he saved up. And he was using all of that cash in order to buy investment properties, 100% with his cash, and then use the properties as cash flow for his retirement. A really good method. But what happened one day is somebody had contacted him. In fact, he had purchased 2 homes that were right next door to this house that we're talking about. The first home that he had purchased, the second home, it was a wholesale deal that I had, and I sold it to him. And so he actually called me or had the seller call me on this deal And they called me up and said, hey, I talked to the neighbor, and he says that you could help me with this house, and here's the situation. Well, in this situation, it was, I believe, the sister-in-law of the owner of the property. The owner's husband had passed away, and now the owner was into long-term, managed care for some heart issues. This house smelled deeply of cigarette smoke. It had signs on the doors, oxygen unused, no smoking. But just walking into the house, you could tell that they had smoked in this house for a lot of years. But I found this opportunity because an investor, the neighbor, had referred this person to me. They had invested all their cash. So as an investor, they weren't looking to buy any more houses. And so when they called me, I said, yeah, well, certainly I'm interested in this house. Give me some information about the situation. And so she explained what the situation with the sister-in-law and the husband that had passed away and the condition of the house, and didn't think anybody would be interested in buying it because everything in the house was saturated with cigarette smoke. And she needed help, getting all of the personal property out of the house and all of that kind of stuff. And she was kind of hopeful that some of the personal property could be sold. But I can tell you that everything from the flat screen TV to the end tables to the couches, everything was so saturated with cigarette smoke that not even nonprofits would take it. They weren't interested in it. So I found this opportunity because I made it known that I'm in the investing business. And I'm an investor. I buy homes for cash. I don't tell people, hey, contact me, I'm an investor. I buy homes with no money down. Call me if you want to sell me your house with no money down. No, I always tell people, I buy homes for cash. Now, I don't tell people that it's always my cash, but it certainly is cash. The terms that I negotiated was that, we would buy this home for a certain purchase price. I didn't actually get the specifics of it, but I think it was around $200,000. We'd buy this home for $200,000. We would go in and we would clean everything out of the house for them. And if there wasn't anything that we could sell, we would sell. And we actually had two different estate companies come through this house, and we talked to some, I think it was Goodwill and one of the other local boys' homes here, and they didn't want it. The stuff was too saturated with cigarette smoke. But the seller needed some cash for some things that they were dealing with to get them into, I guess, a long-term care facility to manage, end-of-life type issues. They were already in a home, but they needed to go in this end-of-life care and needed a certain amount of money down in order to get them into that. And then they needed evidence that they'd have money to pay for the ongoing care. So the contract would provide them, the company that they were going into, they were going to have the cash from the sale of the home. And we agreed to buy all of the contents of this home and to clean the entire home out from them as a carrot. And if you've listened to me talk before, a lot of times I talk about using carrots. This was a carrot. We were going to throw everything away. It really had no value at all. But we just figured it into the cost of the acquisition. And so we negotiated a purchase price. And because of the condition of the house, we agreed to give them so much money for the contents, but we agreed that they would give us a credit for the cost of repairs of the home. And so we wrote the contract up that way. We said we're paying X amount, and we'll just say $200,000 for the house, but we need $40,000 in a condition credit on the house. And so the seller would end up with $160,000 plus whatever we paid them for the contents that would help them with what they were doing. And we used this contract and the terms that we negotiated. We set a closing date, and we used private funds in order to secure the loan terms that they needed so they could take it to their long-term care facility. And our private investor on this product said, okay, you're buying the house for $200,000. You need to bring $40,000 in as your down payment. And we took all of that into consideration, submitted all the paperwork to title. Title did up a settlement statement. We sent the settlement statement over to the private money lender. We showed the private money lender that we had $40,000 available to make the down payment that they required. And we moved towards closing. Well, when closing came, the lender took the settlement statement and they said that we're going to loan you $160,000, $200,000 less or $40,000 down payment. And title company then took the $40,000 condition credit and subtracted it from the $200,000 we owed and said you owe $160,000 to close the home. The lender funded the $160,000. We brought no or little money. I think on this deal we were under $1,500 for all of our closing costs and everything after the funding on it. It was almost nothing. We gave them, if I remember right, we gave them about $2,500 for the contents that were inside the home, which we were throwing away anyway. So we're in this thing $4,000, this home. We have no down payment, and the lender funds the entire project. And so that's how we negotiated the terms and how we closed the property with no money out of our own pocket. We used entirely private funds from a lender. And then, of course, we take a property like this and we go in and we completely renovate it. Sometimes you have to remove sheetrock. Sometimes you can just vinegar clean them. Sometimes you can have special treatment. But, in a house like this, you have to do everything to it. And I think we had this house sold within about a week and a half. Even before we were ready to put it on the market, we had the house sold before we were done doing our work. And the buyer actually asked us, the buyer that we found actually asked us to do some additions to the property that they were going to want done after closing. And we just built those into the sale price of the property. So again, no money down, condition credit, property. And this was one out in Apache Junction. Now, I've got some information on the next case study that I wanted to talk about, and it's at a property in Phoenix. But you know what? I thought just as I was sitting here and talking about this, we've had some questions about, you're always talking about buying investment properties, but can you do this to buy a personal residence? And actually, you can. You can actually use these techniques to buy a home that you're going to live in yourself. You just have to approach it as if you're buying an investment property. So let me talk about a property that we bought that was to be, my wife and I were going to live in for a couple years as a house hack. So again, I found this property through an MLS real estate agent. And this is why I guess while I was sitting here, I thought this might be a little bit better story to share, because a lot of times I talk about how I like to work direct with sellers, but this property I actually was an MLS transaction. And so it was an opportunity that was going on the MLS. I found, there was an agent involved. And so there was a lot of considerations. You've got the brokerages, you've got their commissions that they require. But I found this property to be an MLS property. And so I negotiated very similar terms in the process. I negotiated that, this house needs remodel. So what am I going to do? So why don't you do this? Why don't you give me a lease with option to purchase on this home? And so it's an MLS property. And what has to happen? Well, real estate agents need to be paid. But what if we write the terms up so that the real estate agents get paid at the time of the option? And let's set the option to be a very short period of time. We'll move in October, and we'll close in February, so less than 6 months. And this house needs a substantial amount of updating, so we'll pay you what the house is worth in its current market value, and then you give us a lease for 5 or 6 months, and then we will close on it once we get to the end of the lease. So we actually took possession of this house. So again, we got this an off MLS property. We negotiated a lease option on this property. So we treat it just like a regular lease, just like if you're going out to lease a home to live in. We negotiated the terms. We moved into the house. We started to do upgrades on the house. We painted it, replaced, baseboards and fixtures, and did all that kind of stuff, carpet, all those kind of things that you need to or at least my wife wanted to, for us to live in this house. And, so I agreed with it. We did the work that needed to be done to move in the house, new appliances, all that kind of stuff. Now we're leasing the house, right? We don't own it yet. The owner is the landlord. But 5 months later, we go and get a loan on this house that takes into consideration the current value, the appraised value of the home versus the purchase price of the home. And the difference was over 20% of equity. And so we were able to finance this house and close on this house with no money down. The only money we had were the lease payments we made for being there. I would have had a mortgage payment anyways. And we had to pay some closing costs. And I think if I remember right, when we did this loan, we got a lender credit. And I think that was around, at the time, the lender credit was insane. It was like around $7,000. And we used that against all of the closing costs. And we were only out of pocket about $3,000 and purchased this house and closed on it. Again, no money down. And we did this on a house that we were going to occupy. And we occupied it as a house hack for a couple of years so we could avoid capital gains tax. And before we went through and did an entire renovation and sold this house. So it can be done. You can do this on a personal residence. And these are the techniques that I teach in my book. And that's why I say to get more information on how to buy your next real estate investing using no money down, for a limited time, and it's not much longer, but for a limited time, you can still get a copy of my book that I've been discussing and get the secrets of how you can invest in real estate with no money down and get the book absolutely free. By using the QR code available, if you're watching this video version of the podcast, or going to www.nomoneydownoffer.com. That is www.nomoneydownoffer.com. You've been listening to the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast, and we've come to the end of today's episode. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. And if you found this episode, No Money Down Real Estate Investing with Case Studies, helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review. And if you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can always find the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart Podcast, YouTube, and wherever you enjoy listening to your podcast. This is Scott Whitwam. Be sure to join me on our next episode of the Whitwam Wealth Real Estate Podcast, where we're building wealth through real estate.